or
You
a
got
cell of meat.
your systems in your body. You got the digestive system, the cardiovascular. You got the meat system.
Hey everyone, welcome to What's on the Fourth Floor. I'm your host today. I'm Ethan Goobles, and I'm here with my co-host
Carter Walford.
Carson Green.
Carson.
Yeah.
Carson.
We've never heard of a Carson. Actually, we actually have heard of Carson.
I'm
Carson.
the guy silently sitting in the corner.
Yeah.
Our
You may have
silent
seen me a few
sound
times,
engineer.
but you can't actually see me, so.
Carson is the fabled sound engineer that has been whispered about in podcasts prior.
Yes. He's been the backbone of our operation. And now he gets to be a part of it. Are you ready for today's episode, Carson?
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and start with the first segment then. The first segment, as always, is What's With That? And I actually have something I noticed that I want to talk about. Recently, it was Thanksgiving. Did you guys enjoy Thanksgiving? Did you have a big dinner?
I'll be honest, I got, well, first of all, we did our Thanksgiving dinner on Friday instead of Thursday.
Well,
And
my family did it on Saturday.
Thanksgiving
Thursday.
came and went, and I didn't even realize until, 3/4 of the way through the day, someone said Happy Thanksgiving, and I was like, oh, yeah, it is Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Yeah, on Thursday. Yeah.
Ours went by pretty quick. We just had Thanksgiving lunch. We had lunch, not dinner. But, yeah, we didn't really do much.
Let me
Sat
ask
around
you
and
though.
relaxed.
But okay, so did you guys have like a Thanksgiving dinner, with turkey and mashed potatoes and the whole shebang?
Yes, there was a
Yes.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Do you guys eat all of
I
your
do
okay,
eat.
do you
It's true.
sorry. Do you eat your mashed potatoes, corn, and do you mix stuff together?
I do that for leftovers.
Okay,
So-
leftovers only.
We have a thing called commercials, and basically what we do, it's
Commercials.
It's weird. It's called
Like, not
commercials.
like TV
I don't know
commercials?
why, but basically all we do is we just take all the leftovers and a piece of white bread, and you just throw all the leftovers on this piece of white bread, and just call that lunch the next
This
day.
is what your family
Call
does.
it a commercial?
We
They
call it
they
a
call it
commercial, yeah.
commercials.
Fair enough.
Interesting.
But yeah, I have no qualms, no problems.
No qualms?
No qualms. I take no umbrage to touching food. It's fine in my book. I don't do it on purpose, but if things mix around, that's fine.
Right. So here's the thing. The second Thanksgiving meal I was having that same day. Again, we had our dinner on Saturday. So we had the first Thanksgiving meal, and then we have all the leftovers for supper later that day. And I noticed that I was mixing literally everything, the corn, the mashed potatoes, the turkey, and the stuffing. I was putting it all together and put gravy on top. And it tasted great. I think it actually tastes better that way. And so I was thinking, it's really only the Thanksgiving meal that you can mix those food. You can mix pretty much everything on your plate together, and it tastes better that way.
As far as known meals go,
As far as known meals or traditional meals go,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
I buy that.
And I was thinking, the reason why this occurs, it's a sort of transitive property of Thanksgiving dinner. Because you think about it, corn and mashed potatoes, if you mix your corn into your mashed potatoes, that's a pretty common thing, right?
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Right, yeah. So you think about mixing corn and mashed potatoes together, that's okay. You're good with that. You think about mixing corn and stuffing together, and that doesn't really sound great. However, turkey and stuffing sounds good.
Yes.
So are you
and
kind of saying that
turkey.
certain foods mix well together, but when you mix all of those certain foods that mix well together,
There's-
it's
Right,
just
yeah,
the perfect
The only way,
concoction.
yeah, the only way you can get stuffing and corn to go together is, or maybe I should say it this way, because you wouldn't think about mixing stuffing and mashed potatoes together, maybe. But the only way you can get them to go together is if you also mix turkey in with it.
It's the missing link.
It's the missing
Uh-huh.
link, exactly. But
So,
I think that's only part of the reason. I think the the second half at least of the reason is that you can put gravy over top of all of these.
I'll buy that.
And so
So
the
good.
gravy is kind of the common flavor among all of them. It ties them together.
Kind of the
I mean, have
glue
you ever-
that
you-
holds it all together,
Yeah.
right?
Have you ever thought about that? I mean, that's just an amazing property of the Thanksgiving meal that we just take for granted every year.
I've never thought about it, but now I'm thinking if I just took everything out of my fridge and like dumped it all into a big bowl and
Oh
then
my
like
God,
spread
that'd be-
ketchup over the top of it all, would that
Common
be
flavor.
delicious? You know?
Oh.
Well, it depends on what's
So
in the fridge.
It's
I
essentially
mean,
doing
fair
the
enough.
same thing as the Thanksgiving meal, but
well, see, like one thing
'Cause
I do.
everything in my fridge probably goes with something else that's in my fridge.
See, like
Ooh,
you have like
probably.
chips in a sandwich, right?
Yes,
So I sometimes put the chips and crush them up and then put them in my sandwich.
I've put a chip on a sandwich.
I
I've
put a
never
chip on a
crushed it up
sandwich
before.
before.
Though.
It's
Yeah.
pretty good, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like that's another type of meal though that you could do that with.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Like
I
there's
suppose-
got to be like some like snack almost ways that you could do
So
it.
so here's the
but
difference
not
though.
like an actual meal.
But like, let's compare what you just said. Okay, so sandwiches and chips, whether you put the chips on the sandwich or not, sandwiches and chips together is a pretty traditional meal.
Oh, okay, I see.
Corn and mashed potatoes and stuffing and turkey is a traditional meal. So therefore they can mix well together with gravy. However, getting everything out of your fridge
No,
and
you don't.
I don't think you can make I don't think all of that together would be a traditional meal.
That's the traditional. We're going grocery shopping tomorrow meal, and
You need,
we gotta clean it out.
we got to clean everything up. Yeah. Yeah. I love those days when my mom gets all of the leftovers out of the refrigerator that's been in there for the past week. And she's just like, we got to clean all of this up. And there's no possible way that the four of us can clean up, meals that we've had for the past 7 days. But yes, she still says we need to finish it
We're
up.
gonna try.
We're gonna try. So then you end up eating like lasagna with some baked beans on the side or some weird combo like that.
So here's a question on that then. How long do you guys keep leftovers before you toss them? Cause see, I usually keep them for like a week at the most, and I feel like that's almost too much.
First of all, I only ever like now that I'm living on my own and sort of making my own food and whatnot, I will always eat the leftovers. I will finish leftovers before making a new meal. Yeah.
Wait,
So
okay, that's actually probably a good rule of thumb to follow, I suppose. But I don't think I would. I don't live on my own. I don't make my own food, but I would if I had the opportunity. And I don't think I would. I'd probably be making something new every night and then eating the leftovers for lunch the next day.
that makes sense.
And if I don't finish the leftovers for lunch the next day, it would carry into the day after that.
But see, I've fallen into the trap where it's like I say that, and then I don't eat them the next day, and then they just sit in there till the weekend,
Yeah,
and
you
I'm
just
like,
keep 'em
I haven't gone
around
grocery shopping in
for
a
so
long
long.
time.
And then do you chance it? Do you
I do.
look at
It's like the
food that's
spaghetti
been in
looks
there
pretty
for so
good right
long?
now, but it's been in there a while, and I'm like, it can't be that long.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Like how bad could it possibly be? And then
yeah,
you,
it's like
and
it's
then you get
pasta.
some awful disease and die.
Maybe you
That's
could
how bad it
mix.
could be.
Maybe you could mix your spaghetti with your leftover tuna, and then pour ranch on the top, and then it worked well together.
So just make like a Thanksgiving leftovers, but with tuna, spaghetti, and
Yeah, then it wouldn't be Thanksgiving leftovers then.
no, but it's
I
the
don't
same
even know what you would
concept.
call it. What would you call it?
You would just call it
what's in
I'm-
my fridge.
What's on the fridge?
What's on the fourth fridge?
However, this doesn't work for the entire Thanksgiving meal.
Doesn't it? Oh, for pie, I guess.
Well, sure, you got pies,
Keep
you got salads and stuff.
toss
You
some
got all
pie and
the
some
rest
mashed
of the
potatoes.
sides. You can't mix that in with your mashed potatoes and gravy.
You-
I wouldn't mix my grandma's marshmallow Jello salad in with stuffing and gravy.
I buy that.
Yeah, I
you
wouldn't
buy
do
it
that.
like you
I
buy it at
wouldn't
the
do
store, or
No,
you're
but
just
no,
buying
like,
into what I'm saying.
I believe I'm buying into what you're saying. I
Okay.
believe you.
It was a little confuzzling there.
But
Puzzling.
yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
only the sort of the poster children, the poster children of Thanksgiving that are able to work well together.
Right.
Whenever all the rapscallions who can't work with the team, they get relegated to the sides, the side dishes.
So, just out of curiosity, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about like other meals, other traditional meals that this might work for. And of course, the first one I thought of was, or the next occasion I thought of was Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have pretty much the same meal for Christmas? Do you eat turkey and
See, we do duck.
duck?
Yeah, we
Mm.
cook
Do
up
you hunt
duck.
your own duck?
No,
No.
They just buy the duck.
we
I
just
assume.
buy the duck from the store.
I mean, did you hunt your own turkey?
Well,
yeah.
no, but I don't know. I come from a small rural town, so hunting your own duck and eating it is not exactly
It's not unheard of.
rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, neither is hunting a turkey.
That's
Well,
true.
you raise a turkey, and
Wait,
I suppose
I
you
don't
hunt.
think people
Yeah, you
raise
hunt turkeys.
turkeys
Yeah,
that
yeah.
often.
People hunt turkeys.
Yeah.
You hunt turkeys. I don't know if do we eat wild turkey? We eat raised turkeys.
We do eat raised turkeys. Well, typically you eat raised duck as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's all raised.
Not unless
meat.
you hunt it. See, that's the
I
thing.
mean, not unless you hunt the turkey.
But
I feel like in this country, the most, well, maybe not in this country, but in my town at least.
that's
Let's
different.
jump down to my
Size.
town. In my town, the majority of ducks that were eaten were hunted. The majority of turkeys that were eaten were raised.
I think for the ducks, maybe that's an anomaly. I think in most towns, most food eaten, period, is raised.
Yeah, I don't think most towns in America go out and hunt for their food, like for Thanksgiving and stuff like that. I think the majority of the country probably goes to a store and buys it.
But my family,
I don't go to the store and buy duck though.
But it's like a special occasion duck. You don't
Does
eat duck
the
every
average
day.
American
do
go
you
buy
ever
duck?
eat duck? I don't know if I've ever eaten a duck.
It's
I've never
very
eaten
good.
duck.
Like I would recommend it. It's very good, but it takes a lot of work to actually prepare a duck.
My family typically does crab legs for Christmas dinner. That is our tradition. It's very
Crab
we go
legs.
seafood with it.
Yeah, not the biggest fan of seafood. At least my family isn't. So that's probably why I'm not, because we
Mhm.
don't eat it
You
very
just don't
often.
eat it
So
very
then,
often.
Ethan, do you guys do the traditional like turkey and all that
no,
again?
no. We do soups and stuff. Not that. Okay, soups, and then other like snacky stuff on the side. So, actually, the tradition in my house that my dad and his brothers really love is oyster stew.
Yeah, we have that at Christmas as well.
That's a Christmas dish,
Yeah.
We
especially in
don't do that.
Nebraska. I think that's a Nebraska thing. Why
Yeah,
is that a Nebraska thing?
Yeah, because there's a lot of fresh oysters around.
fresh
Nebraska.
oysters. Yeah, I have no idea why.
Trawl them
It's
out
just
of the
like-
river.
It's just like chili and cinnamon rolls. Have you heard
Oh,
of that
like-
combination?
Doesn't
Like the chili
Runza
on
do
the
it?
cinnamon roll. I've never done that.
At occasions, sure, you can do it if you want, but no, it's like a cinnamon roll on the side. Like you serve chili with cinnamon rolls.
I've seen it at like Runza before, but that's the only place I've ever heard
Well,
of
Runza
it.
is a Nebraska-based
Oh, it is, isn't
It's
it?
true.
restaurant.
I always forget that, and I'll talk to people from like not the Midwest, and they'll be like, "What's Runza?"
Yeah, what's Runza?
Come on, guys, Runza, don't you know? And they don't.
Okay, so this is something my family does. For New Year's Eve, we always eat a spoonful of black-eyed peas.
Oh,
I don't know where it originated from or what it's supposed to. I don't know why it's like good luck is like what
Oh,
it's
yeah.
supposed to be.
black-eyed peas.
Yeah, we just eat a spoonful of black-eyed peas.
I don't think
each.
I've ever eaten a black-eyed pea.
I mean, they're not really good. I don't really recommend it.
I wouldn't recommend.
wait, do they force you to eat a spoonful of black-eyed peas?
I'm not like held up to gunpoint with a spoon
they-
of
they-
black-eyed
What?
peas.
They tie you up.
I mean, yeah, I eat a black-eyed peas every New Year's Eve. That's just something we do.
that reminds me. Along with the oyster stew, pickled herring is
Ooh.
because I said we do like little snack things on the
Uh-huh.
side. Pickled herring is the thing that comes out for Christmas, and we have no idea why it's the Christmas tradition. But I think I've heard other families from Nebraska say that that's also a tradition in their family.
It sounds like your family does do seafood, and you didn't realize it.
Well, okay, seafood.
Comes from the sea. I don't think herring.
That's-
Thank you.
That's ocean meat.
Thank you, Carson. Seafood does come from the sea.
It does. I mean, it has it in its name.
Personally, I've always disliked the traditional meals, like Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner. I've liked these
Oh,
less than just normal
Of
meals.
course. Carter,
Um,
of course you've got to go
I
against
just
the
like
rest
to-
of society.
I
Let's hear why.
I eat way less on like Thanksgiving than just any normal day of the year because Thanksgiving foods are all just kind of meh. Like the only thing,
Unless you mix them together and pour
Unless-
gravy over the top.
I mean,
I'm telling you,
I
it's a
don't-
thing.
I guess this is just sort of a personal, subjective thing of what I don't do and do not like and what is served at my Thanksgiving, I guess. But it's gotten even worse, and I have been vegetarian the last 2 Thanksgivings, and so there's even less
Oh, that
like options to
stinks.
eat.
You get like stuffing
Yeah,
and
I
mashed potatoes.
I
and,
eat, I ate mashed
that's it.
potatoes and this fake meat roast thing that we buy specifically for me, and that's it. That's what you get for Thanksgiving. So
That
it is.
stinks.
They're lackluster holidays for me, but
You could have soup.
I could have soup. Like what kind of soup though? Yeah, most soups got.
Well, not all soups, but every soup that I'm thinking of right now has some sort of meat in
Yeah,
it.
it is. It's it's
Pea soup? Does pea soup have meat?
pea soup.
Just cream of mushroom. That's all you need.
How about
Just-
cold
Just
cucumber?
straight out of the can,
I
slurp
can't
it
even say it.
down. Cream of mushroom.
Oh,
But no, I make do.
that was
but,
disgusting.
Yeah, so that's me. That's my opinion.
You can make some sort
Holiday
of
meals
soup
are
with
overrated.
eggs in it.
Don't need them. What?
You can make some sort of soup with eggs in it.
Yeah, what, egg drop soup? I do.
Is
I
that-
love
wait.
Chinese food. It's so good. I eat egg drop soup all the time.
There you go. I don't eat Chinese food, so I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I like Chinese food. No, yeah, egg drop soup is definitely a thing.
That's what I'm having for Thanksgiving next year. Just some Chinese takeout.
Chinese food.
You like put some ramen
Wait.
in it as well, and it's really good.
I was actually just talking with one of my friends from Arlington, and on Thanksgiving, he went out and had Chinese food
Nice.
at a mall.
That's what I'm doing.
That reminds me of like the Christmas story, where they go and get the duck from the Chinese place on Christmas.
Is that what your family does on Christmas?
They go get duck from the
We
Chinese
don't-
place.
No, we don't go
From
get duck,
Chinatown?
but we do eat duck.
But
Okay.
don't hunt it. Yeah, see, we've
You
learned
don't
this.
hunt it. If you don't hunt it and you don't go buy it, where do you get your duck?
We
It falls out of the
it
sky.
just falls right in our front yard, and
It's,
we just scoop it up.
3D printed duck.
Oh, that would be interesting. I
Right?
think they're actually working on trying to 3D. I mean, okay,
They do have 3D printed meat. I
3D
know
printing
that.
meat. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what.
Which
So I
is
wasn't the only one who heard about this.
yeah, 3D printed meat or just lab grown meat in general is like a super interesting sort of venue of science.
I'm wondering like how much they can get it to taste like meat.
Well, I'm sure
It's gotta
can
get
get
As long as it
close,
has
right?
nutritional value, I
That's
think.
the other
Because I
question,
think
yeah.
the point of this is to try to feed people.
I don't see why they couldn't get it arbitrarily close to regular meat, just like on an almost molecular level. It's just the same as.
That would
meat.
be. I honestly I don't know how the
Well,
3D
wouldn't it be like
printing works,
cloning
but
in a
that would be
way?
really hard.
Wouldn't it be like just cloning? Like they just clone a cell of meat over
Yeah.
and over again?
A cell of meat.
No,
I
I
feel
mean,
like we
like-
have to be a little bit more specific and say muscular
Well,
tissue,
okay, sure.
or
you
a
got
cell
your-
of meat.
your systems in your body. You got the digestive system, the cardiovascular. You got the meat system. You know?
Meat system.
Oh.
That's where all the meat comes from. Goodness.
we need to go out and educate ourselves on agriculture,
and some
where we get our
anatomy.
food
Some
from.
anatomy, yeah.
It does not come from a 3D printer.
We
At
don't
least
use proteins. We
Not
just
yet,
use meat.
anyways.
not yet. That would be an interesting development in our culture if we were able to start 3D printing food. Do you think the first thing they would start 3D printing would be like a Big Mac or something?
I think once 3D printed food is economically viable, it will swiftly overtake all other forms of meat production, and it'll be just like the way you get meat. Like ranches and cattle drives and all that will just go away
No, I
because
agree
it'll be
with that.
so much cheaper. Because like
Sure.
honestly, animals are super inefficient. You have to feed them so much.
And they take
to
up so
get-
much space
They
as
take
well.
up so much space where you could just
Wait,
have a
but-
factory that
okay.
pumps it out.
Again, this is my lack of knowledge on how 3D printing foods would work, but where are we going to get the organic matter to make?
Just probably you could
The
get it from
food.
almost any bio. I assume I haven't done the science on this, but you could probably just get it from any kind of biomass, like any plant.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, sure. Yeah, I suppose they've got any living organism is going to have the four fundamental parts of life.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what? Four fundamental.
I think it's
the word
3,
I'm-
isn't it?
What?
Isn't
I can
it
only
3
think of the 7
fundamentals?
characteristics
I
of
think
life,
it's 4.
which is not what you're talking
It's
about.
Oh, okay.
proteins. Sorry, no. So amino acids, which is what makes proteins. Like fatty acids.
Lipids?
So yeah, lipids, all that stuff. Carbohydrates.
Yes, that is one.
So like sugars, and DNA.
And so once you have all 4 of those things, eventually, if you're clever enough, you can just combine them in any way and make whatever you want. Any meat out of any plant.
Well, we're almost out of time here in our first segment. So let's actually. Was that your last phrase there?
I do love getting the last punch in.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know you do,
To,
Carter.
To summarize, I'm pretty meh on all these holidays.
Of course.
I'm just a real grouch, I'm a Grinch.
Yeah, we'll talk about this again at Christmas time. So, and with that, that's the end of our first segment. What's with that? We're gonna take a quick break here, and we'll be back in a couple seconds. So stick around. And we're back. Are you guys ready to talk about some news?
I love the news.
I'm
It's
ready.
my favorite news topic.
Your favorite news topic
It's
is
just
the
the
news.
Yeah, news. It's real meta.
Well, this of
This
course
isn't
we
news
try
news.
to make this one science related news. This isn't exactly science related, but it was a scientific study. Well, you'll find out. Okay, so I found an article in the New York Times written by a college professor, and she says that she doesn't allow her students in her lectures to be on their computers or tablets, phones, any of their devices.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we have a class like this. Our physics class is the same way. And I'm sure you listeners out there probably have had classes, or you have a class the same way. But she says it may seem harsh, but there is, according to her article, there's a growing body of evidence that shows that college students learn less when they use computers or tablets during lectures. And I thought this was really interesting because I feel oftentimes I convince myself, at least, that taking notes on my laptop is better for me than taking notes
By hand.
by hand using pen and paper. But that's only in classes that I don't need to make diagrams or write equations or whatnot.
There are some classes that wouldn't be feasible to take.
It wouldn't be feasible to type.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a kid in my DiffyQ class, my differential equations class, who does take his notes on his laptop.
Does he have like a Apple Pen
I
input
don't-
thing, or does he just
he
type them out?
types. He types.
Types it? I
That
couldn't do
is-
Yeah,
that.
I don't know how he does that.
That's interesting.
How do you type an integral sign?
I feel like there's probably
I have no
programs
idea.
out
Command
there.
for it.
What?
Yeah, there's probably programs and different keyboards
Yeah.
that you can install. But
Right.
no, I've thought about the written notes versus typed notes quite a bit,
Right.
and I've flip flopped on which one's better.
Sure.
I think it is okay. When I would type notes, I would say I'm typing notes because I want to spend as little time as possible looking away from and not listening to the lecture. And when I'm taking notes like by hand, I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm writing down and not listening to what they're saying. And so I would type notes to sort of lessen this amount of time, this gap between what they say and when I write it down. But,
Okay.
See, I would say for
I-
me, I don't think I've actually ever typed notes. I think the only time I've done it is I took a programming class, and we would do programming during class. And
you can easily type. You pretty much have to type that out.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I would
You
just
type out a little
open-
note on how to do.
I would just open my
this.
notepad and type the code that he's
Yeah,
writing
just type
down.
the code. Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really see myself as. I think I just because I don't really go back to my notes that much anyways, so writing them on paper doesn't seem like a big deal to me.
Right.
I don't really look back at my notes that often.
Well, so here's how they did the study, though. So this study was conducted by researchers at Princeton and at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. And they randomly selected students in multiple classes, but they randomly selected students to take notes during lecture on their laptops, and other students to take notes using pencil and paper, pen and paper. And what they found was that the students who took notes using their laptops, their grades were actually dramatically worse. And they don't actually, in this article, it doesn't actually give me any numbers or percentages, but she does say it was dramatically worse, and so I'm assuming that means that it's pretty noticeable.
Yeah.
Like maybe a whole letter grade.
By saying dramatically, yeah, that's what I would assume as well. It's not like...
Yeah, so I think it's kind of cool how they did this, just to delve into the science aspect of it, because when you think about it, if you're going to do this test, first of all, you wouldn't be able to just take results, or like just look at grades from any random class and look at the grades of students who do take notes using laptops, and look at grades of students who take notes using pencil and paper, because sometimes you'll have students who take notes using a laptop and they're purposely distracting themselves, like you just said, Carter. And then other times you have just high achieving students that just happen to be taking notes using their laptops. So there's a bit of selection bias there. So they needed to eliminate that selection bias, which is why they chose to do they randomly assign which students would take notes which way. That's their little blurb about the science behind this, since this has to be science related. That's how we conduct research. But yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward, pretty obvious probably.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that they found was that the notes of the students who took notes on a laptop, it was pretty much verbatim of what the teacher was saying. You know, they pretty much was just typing the transcript of the lecture. So it wasn't actually like going into their brain and they were processing it. It was just going straight down to their fingers and they were typing it out. Whereas the pencil and paper note takers, what they were writing was just short fragments of what the teacher was saying, or they were completely rewording it themselves, so you could see that they were thinking about it and processing it before they wrote it down, which is probably why the students taking notes with their laptop were getting worse grades, because they weren't thinking about it during a lecture, and it was just going in one ear, out the other, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. See, on top of that, I would say most of my professors like to, this is kind of a little bit off topic, I guess, but like most of them like to put their slides up online.
Oh, yeah.
And I really like that, because then I don't have to try and write down all this little information.
Yeah, but how often do you actually go back and look at the slides online?
That's actually true as well. I guess for astronomy I do a lot.
Go on.
Because like I can find equations on there and stuff I may have forgot about in lecture. If I'm like looking for a specific topic, I can look in those specific slides for that thing. But I guess I really don't go back to those that often either. But it just helps me focus more on the professor when I'm not trying to write down a whole bunch of stuff that I could look up online if I need to.
Right.
I think the benefit of having to process the information when taking a pencil and paper note does, like, I gave my defense of typed notes earlier, but I do right now currently take all of my notes on pencil and paper, so like obviously there's some merit to it. And I think the benefit of having to process the information when you write it down outweighs the sort of delay in the sort of gap between what they say and what you write down and shortening that when taking typed notes. But I was thinking that maybe you can sort of double down on not having to think about it at the time, or not. I guess here's what I'm saying. If you, say, recorded the lecture and didn't have to stop and not pay attention to it at all, because you're not paying very much attention to the lecture that is currently happening if you're taking notes, because you have to think
Either
about what
way,
writing
if you're
down.
taking notes using a laptop
using
or
a
with
laptop
pencil
or
and paper.
using a pencil and paper.
That's true. Yeah.
I was thinking maybe you could sort of double down and just record the lecture.
Which
on
I have done
purpose.
before.
Do not take notes. Just listen to what they're saying.
Yeah.
But then you have to sort of supplement that later. You have to add something in later, like go back and spend an hour sort of processing and writing down
But
what
then
they
you're
said.
forced to. See, they always say that the best way to study is rewriting your notes or whatnot. But I actually have done it in our Physics 201 course, the Modern Topics class, where we basically just had lectures from different physics professors every week. I sat in the front row and then I just recorded the lectures, the audio of it on my laptop, and I just sat there and paid attention the whole lecture. And then when I had to go back and write my paper later on about the lecture, I had already understood the material well enough because I paid attention during lecture. And then when I needed to reference certain bits, I just went back and listened to the whole thing again. And it was basically like listening to the lecture again. And it was a rewriting my notes in a way.
Yeah, something like this is what I did first semester of my freshman year here, when classes were a bit easier. You can get away with, if you just make a concerted effort to pay attention very closely. I didn't take a single note my entire first semester here at UNL, and I felt like that was better than what I was doing in high school, where I was taking notes but not really paying attention, just sort of writing things down. But it takes a lot of, sort of mental effort, and you have to be very disciplined to not take any notes at all.
You got to put effort into it during class and outside of class. So what's the best way to do that?
I think barring having very interactive classes where you ask the professor questions and they ask you questions individually in class, which is not feasible for large classes, I think that would be, the best solution or the best way to learn. But barring that, I think just recording the lecture and trying to pay very close attention and then going and rewriting your notes later
would be
is
the best
second
way.
best.
Yeah. They did find in this, I will say this though, I mean that wouldn't really apply to this, but they did find that the students sitting around the students with the laptops also had a diminish in their grades.
Yeah.
Because it was distracting.
I get that too.
I mean, it was distracting if the student on the laptop was distracted by, Facebook or Twitter or whatnot, if they were doing other stuff on their laptops. And this was actually a part of the study. They told these students to purposely be distracted in class to see how it affects others, and it does negatively affect others.
I think because sort of, it's like if you're on a diet, right? If you have chocolate in every cupboard of your house, you're going to have to work very hard to maintain your diet. And it's like if you're taking notes on a laptop, just the fact that you could possibly distract yourself and go and mess around on the laptop, even if you don't do it, still pulls on your attention.
The sweets are right there. All you have to do is just double click on your web browser.
Yeah. So if you had a laptop that could not possibly do anything but take notes, I don't know, like a piece of paper.
A piece of paper and a pencil.
Yeah, we're basically saying just use a pencil and paper. The science says so. And yeah, that was my news article. We're gonna make this a short segment today, because the next one will be a little bit longer. So we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, we're gonna be answering questions from the audience.
Wow.
That'll be the first time we've done this, so I'm looking forward to it. And we're back for our last segment of the day. This is a new one, guys. I'm super psyched about this. We've got questions from the audience, and we have chosen to divide this up amongst ourselves. We each chose a question, and we did a little bit of research on it to make sure we were at least 90% sure in our explanation. And we're going to read the questions to you guys and give our answers. Maybe have a little bit of discussion about it. Maybe have some banter between us. I don't know how this is gonna work, so we'll just jump into it.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. I like it. I'm gonna throw this to Carter.
So the question I chose to answer today is, does all electromagnetic radiation produce heat? Can you have light without heat? And this question,
So this is 2 questions technically,
well,
but
this is
they're
technically
related.
2 questions, and it's It's short, but it's got a lot going on. It's a bit deceptive. First of all, we need to sort of distinguish between. Well, we have to define what heat is. A lot of people use this sort of incorrectly.
And maybe electromagnetic radiation as well.
Okay, electromagnetic radiation is, well, the second part of the question says, can you have light without heat?
Oh,
This is
right.
because, electromagnetic radiation, for all intents and purposes, is light. It's
Yes.
it goes from radio waves, magnetic waves, visible.
Correct.
Infrared.
Human beings are only capable of detecting a small sliver of the spectrum
From about
of electromagnetic
400
radiation.
to 700,
Mhm.
I believe.
Nanometers,
Nanometers.
yeah.
Nanometers, yes.
So,
But-
because light is behaves as a wave,
Mm-hmm.
and so the waves of light can have any wavelength, and so the longer the wavelength is, the lower on the spectrum it is. It's more like radio waves or
Mhm.
microwaves,
But
and the smaller the wavelength, the higher on the spectrum, more like gamma rays or X-rays.
basically, if you hear electromagnetic radiation and just substitute in the word light, you'll be good to go.
Same thing. Yep.
Yep.
Anyways, we need to distinguish between heat and temperature here, because heat, or I guess temperature is what most people think of when they think heat. It's sort of how energetic. Well, I can't say how energetic the particles are. Heat is measured in energy. It's sort of when you measure heat, you use joules and electron volts. It is how much energy
Right.
and kinetic energy the particles have in a substance. It doesn't make sense. It also does not make sense to talk about the heat of an individual particle, like away from other things, because heat is also defined as
The transfer of
yes,
energy,
it is the
right?
transfer of energy from
Yeah.
one place to another. So that is sort of an important part of this question. And so going back to the question, does all electromagnetic radiation produce heat? I'm going to get a bit semantic here, but when a particle or a body radiates or gives off radiation, it's transferring energy that it has to somewhere else, which is sort of what heat is.
Yeah, that's the definition of heat.
Yep.
Exactly.
So I suppose you couldn't have electromagnetic radiation without heat, because the radiation is the heat. It
right.
is the transfer of energy from one place to another. So that's
That
that's-
answers that first question.
yeah,
it's,
that
it's
answers
basically
the first
just a
question.
misunderstanding of.
hmm
It makes sense
And then
that you would misunderstand that.
And then if we substitute in the word temperature, it gets a little bit more fun. Can you have light without heat or temperature? Temperature in this is getting, well, we sort of think of temperature of as how much jiggling molecules in a substance does, how much they
Yeah.
move around. But another way of thinking about it is how likely it's the temperature is sort of the distribution of energies in a spectrum, which is a lot to think about. If you have something at a low temperature, most of the molecules in it are not moving very fast. It is very high. There's a very high probability that if you look at any molecule in it, it's not moving very fast. And then as you warm things up, the probabilities shift, and most of the molecules you look at will be more energetic and moving around a bit more.
You're talking about just the average kinetic energy in a.
And this is sort of how you have to think about temperature.
This is how we define temperature. It's
Yeah.
just the average amounts of energy there are.
And so
In
you can't
something.
really talk
In
about
something.
temperature in terms of a single, photon or a single
Atom
atom
or molecule,
or
right?
molecule. But anything that radiates electromagnetic radiation or light will be sort of, because it is radiating this energy, very high probabilistic. When you radiate energy, it is because an electron in a molecule or an atom is jumping from a high energy state to a low energy state. And so if you
Oh.
have energy to radiate out, you had molecules or particles in excited energy states. And so you had to have had, relatively high temperature in your starting conditions to then, expel that
Okay,
energy
so
Mhm.
so
in
long
the form of
story
radiation.
long story short is that you can't have light unless you have some sort of hot body that produced the light.
Hot is
Because
sort of mixing into heat. You have to have a high temperature body,
a high temperature body.
relatively high temperature body,
Right.
because this sort of heat especially is
Yeah.
completely relativistic.
Just think about for instance the things that produce light. Well, typical things that produce light. A light bulb.
Yeah.
Gets hot.
And a lot of people say, like thermal goggles are things that look in the infrared regime of radiation, but that's just because that is something that is hot enough to give off infrared radiation.
Right.
And then when you get something very hot or at a very high temperature, it'll start to glow, white hot, red hot,
Sure.
that sort of thing. And so, long story short, you must have high temperatures to give off electromagnetic radiation, and the radiation itself is heat. So you can't have the radiation without heat, because that's what it is.
All right. Cool. Let's move on to. I'll go ahead and do my question then. That was a great explanation, Carter.
Gee, thanks.
I like that. I had a question. And this is an astronomy question. So we've talked about how much I love astronomy. But the question is, why are galaxies flat and not spherical? That's a great question. Honestly, that is a great question, and it gets into a bit of physics. So I'll start slowly, I suppose. First of all, galaxies, if you're not familiar, we have, you might be familiar with the sun, our star, and the bodies that orbit the sun. We deem that the solar system, or, a star's system. And turns out you can actually have a bunch of stars that are all orbiting around a central location, kind of like planets that orbit the sun, a central location, the sun. And we call that a galaxy, when you have large clusters of these stars. The first thing I want to say in regards to this question is that technically not all galaxies are flat. There are different types of galaxies. Are you guys aware of the different types of galaxies?
I'm aware of naming schemes like spiral, sombrero, I think is one.
That's the name of a galaxy, not the.
But that
not
is
a classification.
I would say for me, I just know the flat ones really, like the spiral ones, stuff like that. Those are the ones I know off the top of my head.
I can't imagine ever seeing or hearing of a perfectly like spherical galaxy.
Well, they don't come perfectly spherical, but most of them are flatly shaped.
Fairly
flat.
flat.
Fairly flat, right? For instance, our galaxy is the Milky Way. So when you look up, and this is just an interesting side note, when you look up in the night sky and you see the dim milky cloud going across the sky, and that's called the Milky Way. That's technically you looking at the rest of the stars in our little local cluster, and they're all orbiting a central point, and it's got kind of arms of different clusters of stars kind of coming off of that central point, and they're all spinning around in a big circle. That's our Milky Way, and it's a flat pancake-like shape, and most of the galaxies we see in the night sky are that flat shape. However, there are elliptical galaxies that are more of like a ovalish shape. They're not flat. They're basically like a football, kind of, with a football with round edges instead of points at the noses. You guys picturing what I'm saying here?
You're saying that it's like
It's oval shaped.
It's oval
yeah,
shaped.
It's an oval.
It's oval. It's an elliptical galaxy. We'll put pictures on the website
in
of
the
this.
show notes. Yeah,
In the show
definitely.
notes. So getting to the question though, why do these galaxies become flat? It's actually basically the same reason as why our solar system is relatively flat disk. And that goes back to so let's just stick with that. Go back to the formation of a star. Stars form from giant clouds of gas and dust in interstellar space. And these clouds are so big that they do have, it does have its own gravity, but it's so big that it doesn't really feel its own gravity very strong. But it's enough to start collapsing the clouds to a central location. And the clouds also have a slight spin. They rotate about a certain axis. And the matter that's closest to this axis is moving slowest. It's rotating around the axis really slowly. So the gravity is allowed to capture that matter and bring it into the new forming star. However, the matter that's further away from the axis is moving a lot faster due to angular momentum. And so gravity can't pull it into this new forming star because it's moving too fast. So there's nothing, it can't move inward, but gravity can pull it down into a disc shape. Again, we'll probably end up putting diagrams or links to diagrams in the show notes. But so basically what you get is, because of this angular momentum, the high angular momentum of the matter that's further away from the rotation, you get disc shapes. And this is why, for instance, our solar system is a disc shape. The same thing happens with galaxies. When you have all those stars, if you picture basically a cloud of stars, if you will, before a galaxy forms, is basically acting like that cloud of gas and dust in interstellar space. The stars closest to the axis are moving the slowest, so they can get kind of globbed up in the center. The stars furthest away are moving too fast to go straight towards the center, but they can't get pulled down and into a disc-like shape. So that's a long explanation for why galaxies are flat.
And I guess one other thing you might want to add is that, like our solar system, we have a large, heavy mass object, the sun, in the middle of it. And most galaxies, if I remember right, have black holes in the center of them.
We think. Yeah,
we
you're totally
believe.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would be the heavy mass object that would be, everything in the galaxy would be rotating around,
Right.
like our solar system.
There's lots of questions around that, though. We do have a black hole at the center of our galaxy. It's called Sagittarius A. It's a very luminous object because there's lots of, that's a whole nother story. But we do have a supermassive black hole, the mass of 4 million of our suns, at the center of our galaxy. However, it's not clear as to whether it formed before our galaxy or after. It's not really clear how these supermassive black holes are formed or when they're formed. So it's not necessarily the equivalent of the sun at the center of a solar system, but it is very similar. And it's, in terms of thinking about how galaxies form flat disks, you could pretty much equate those two.
I can't help but have the imagery of having like a lump of dough in my hands, and if you give it a good spin and toss it up into the air like you're making a pizza, it will sort of naturally form this disc shape, all for the same reasons as why galaxies.
It's so similar, but yet there's too much inconsistencies that I wouldn't necessarily use that. It's similar in that the points around the outside of the dough are moving way too fast. If you had some sort of attractive force at the center of the dough ball.
If it was a particularly elastic ball of dough.
Exactly. If you had some sort of attractive force at the center that wanted to pull all the dough in, but then gave it a spin, the dough on the very outside, on the equator of the dough ball, wouldn't be able to fall into the center because it's moving too fast. So yes, you would still get the flattening, the disc shape. Carson.
Yes.
Do you want to...
Question
you had a question.
3.
My question was, why do stars emit different colors of light? So this one actually goes very well with Carter talking earlier with the electromagnetic radiation. Because and the heat, because it goes kind of hand in hand with that, where of course you look at most stars in the sky and you see white little dots up there, sometimes blue, sometimes red. They kind of like, you see little colors in there, but they actually stars can actually be any color that you can think of, visible light, etc. And that's
any color in our visible spectrum.
Any color in our visible spectrum. And also not in our visible spectrum. They can be
And
ultraviolet,
exactly.
infrared, but I'll get into that later. So to start with, there's this idea of black body radiation, which is the fact that all matter emits a radiation. As we talked earlier, the electromagnetic radiation is light, and all matter emits a certain
amount,
or not amount, but also like frequency or wavelength of light. Peak one. Sorry.
Yeah, gotcha. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a peak wavelength that certain matter will emit
at certain temperatures. That is.
So, looking at black body radiation, the peak wavelength that you get from these objects is always dependent on temperature.
Right.
So, we look at stars out there, and they range from 3,000 degrees, which are the red stars, which are going to have a very low wavelength. So they're going to have they have a very high wavelength and a low energy. And then a blue star is going to have a very high temperature of about 25,000 degrees compared to 3,000 for red. And it's going to have a very high energy and a low wavelength. Now, as I said earlier, you can get hotter than that, like ultraviolet. And those we can't actually see with our visible light, but we can still use techniques with we can use different types of telescopes to detect them. But infrared as well, those are above the wavelength of light that we can see, and those can actually last
just below on the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yes,
depends on how you want to
depends on how you look at it.
It's really confusing because if you think about a wave, a wave has a certain wavelength, but it also has a certain frequency, and the larger the wavelength, the lower the frequency. So it depends on how you want to order that spectrum. But typically we order it as the larger wavelengths are in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're the lower energy as well. So really confusing, but
the infrared ones can actually last billions of years because they're such low energy that they don't die as fast. And they can last a really long time for that. But like the ultraviolet ones and above will actually die much faster because they have so much energy running through them.
Right. Yeah, they're dispelling that energy quicker. They're using up their energy.
They're using up the energy
to that makes sense.
Off.
They're giving off more heat.
That makes sense. Exactly. It does go back to what Carter was saying.
Yep.
They're dispelling more energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation.
Which is the heat.
They're giving off heat, and since it's higher energy radiation, therefore it has to be higher frequency or shorter wavelength. So it would be beyond our visible. It'd be towards the bluer end of our visible spectrum.
And you are more likely to receive high energy heat from high temperature objects.
So the hotter the stars are blue, the cooler stars are red.
And
that?
Yeah, for the different colors of light, the peak wavelengths determine what color the sun's going, or what color the stars are going to be.
Right.
And the temperature is what determines that peak wavelength. So that's what you're going to see when you look up through a telescope.
All right. Just really quick here, pop quiz. Do either of you know what area of the visible spectrum our sun peaks in? What frequency of light is it producing the most? What color, at least?
Yellow, I think.
I would guess yellow as well.
It is not yellow. It is green.
Tell us we're wrong. Yeah, green.
It is green.
That's another.
I believe our eyes have got accustomed to.
Our eyes have gotten accustomed to the exact amount. Our eyes have gotten accustomed to the exact amount of light that our sun produces. So we see that as white light, and that's just a biological thing. It's not like a physical thing. Anything to do with physics. The reason why our sun looks yellow is something entirely different.
So we can go into atmospheric effects.
It's atmospheric effects, exactly. We can go into that on another day. But that was great, guys.
Loads of fun.
If
you have, questions, physics related or otherwise, we've got lovely comment bars for you to let us hear what you're thinking about.
Or obviously we have a Facebook and Twitter account, so you can check us out there. But yeah, we want to hear from you. We want to do more of these segments. We love them. We love learning new things.
We love answering questions. We love getting questions.
Yeah. We like doing the research to make sure that we understand the answers before we give them. So, all right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. With that, you've been watching Sorry.
Listening to.
Ignore that. With that, you've been listening to What's on the Fourth Floor. What is on the fourth floor, guys?
It's
All the
You know,
turkey and
that's-
stuffing
yeah,
from
that's what I
Thanksgiving.
was thinking. You know,
Yeah.
Harry Potter, where they have like the big tables that magically
Oh
get food?
yeah, and just magically
Yeah,
appears.
Just
except
like
it's
keeps
not magic,
mashing every
it's-
food together for
It's
you.
3D printers.
3D
Oh.
printers.
They have like
Oh,
a 3D
yeah.
printer food factory on the fourth floor.
Is it like 3D print gravy that just rains down
I don't see
everywhere?
why not.
It just mashes on everything together.
It just it rains from the sprinkler systems.
But that sounds beautiful.
It's a wonder.
Hello? If you're still here, it's because you're looking for more. If that's the case, check us out on Facebook at What's on the Fourth Floor and Twitter at OnFloor4. Again, that's Facebook, What's on the Fourth Floor, Twitter at OnFloor4. That's at OnFloor, the number 4.